Creativity, the ability to transcend traditional ideas through the use of imagination. Since the beginning of recorded history, creative works have stirred the soul and inspired the masses. What is this magical mystery? How do we turn that initial spark into something tangible? How can we apply it in our own lives? Join me as we attempt to answer these and other questions as we delve inside the creative spirit.
Aepril Schaile has traveled the world performing and teaching her unique blend of shamanistic performance art. With an MFA in interdisciplinary art, she draws from a full spectrum of creative expressions, including visual arts, dance, theater, music, and poetry. Aepril brings her lifelong practice and study of occult science, psychology, mysticism, yoga, and belly dancing to create an experience of visceral, ethereal ritual theater. Please welcome to the show, Aepril Schaile. Hi, Aepril. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I was so pleased to get this invitation from you.
Okay, so what I always want to start with is like your early life, like your childhood. Was there any creative people in your family, or were you raised in a creative household?
I was not raised in a particularly creative household. My family, not that Republicans can't be creative, but it was a pretty straight Republican household. And however, I found out later as I started to practice music and dance that my father was dancing, and he was in a band that he didn't want to really talk about very much due to some disappointing developments with that when he was young. And but my grandparents were also dancers, and they won awards doing dances like the Peabody and stuff like that. And my grandmother, both of her brothers learned how to play piano, self-taught, and I'm self-taught pianist. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you mentioned that it was a Republican household. So was creativity encouraged when you did show an interest? Was it encouraged by your family, or were you shut down or encouraged? How did that go?
I wasn't encouraged at all. Most of the emphasis was put on being a career person who'd make lots of money, and so that was pretty much the thing. I was though my father's side of the family are very sort of charismatic. They're characters, and so I think they appreciated me being very. They liked when I was funny, and they liked when I was theatrical, and I think that was sort of a way where it wasn't specifically like, April's an artist and we're going to appreciate that about her, that April's a performer and we really like that, So in that respect, I was nurtured, yeah.
So what were some of your early influences then? If it didn't come from your home, can you remember any instances in your childhood where you saw something and it sparked that in you, or you said, I want to do that when I'm older? Or?
Yeah, I remember there's a little tail going by. That's my dog. I remember seeing musicians and hearing music and wanting to do that. I remember seeing Joan Jett and thinking I wanted to be just like her. So there was that, but there really wasn't a lot, really. This was just something that came out of me later.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that dance is your primary form of expression, or?
No, I wouldn't. I don't have a primary form of expression. I think that dance is kind of what people know me for most as far as my art, but I'm also a poet, and I feel that, my master's is in interdisciplinary art, so the premise behind that, it was so good for me. It was so perfect when I did this program, because part of the beauty of it, and the premise was that as artists we can be very limited when we're just doing one medium, in ways that are detrimental to us as artists and as human beings. And so the idea was that when we get really good at one medium, it can make the other ones better as well. So I've noticed that, for instance, like when being a professional dancer has made my work ethic a lot more focused and disciplined in other formats like music or like poetry. And poetry is the way I feel that I probably express the most vulnerable parts of myself in the most articulate ways. You know, it's sort of more delicate, whereas dance I feel is so much more visceral and about the atmosphere. Poetry is more my introverted artist self, you know.
Well, who were some poets that you, or writers or poets that influenced you, would you say? Well, who would you cite as your influence as a poet then?
Emily Dickinson.
That's a good one.
Pretty big one for me. I don't know. I don't really read a lot of other people's poems. I guess Mirabai, actually, when I think about that, Mirabai, the medieval mystic. Sappho, actually, I'm thinking about it more as you're asking. I'm like, well, actually, you know. And what I loved about both of those women, and Emily Dickinson to some degree, but those women particularly, is Sappho and Mirabai, is the eroticism in the poems. That it's mixed together, the divinity and the erotic are mixed together in this way. Emily Dickinson, of course, writes lots about death, and I always appreciated that, you know. Poe, Edgar Allan Poe.
So do you have any ritual or process that you go to get yourself in the creative mode, or is it just spontaneous? Or could you describe a little bit to people out there what that's like for you or how you go about it?
There's a couple of things. You know, poetry, I find myself needing to really get into my body. They think I would say that about dance, but actually most of my poems are, I'm kind of a synesthete. This is another reason why I think that I am multi-artistic. You know, so I actually, the words that I'm writing are a way for me to describe my bodily feelings. And so in some way, and the energies that I feel are passing through my body. And so in a way that I can't express through dance. And so part of what I do it's not really a formal ritual, more that I need to be still and I need to be listening very carefully to myself. So my poems, I feel, are they are the way that I am trying to express my kinesthetic experience via words, the things that are moving through me. And I actually, when I write my poems, I think this is why Emily Dickinson is kind of important to me. I feel like I am nature, in a way, like I become nature. And so they're often when I'm hearing a storm or I'm out, you know, in the woods somewhere, I'm next to the sea. Those are the times when I really write. Also, my poems are, they're about my, like my visceral experience. Like I say, I'm kind of a synesthete in this way, in that I feel my bodily feelings with words, but I can't. This is kind of interesting. I have a lot of trouble articulating things with words unless it's poetry. Like I'm not as good at doing things prosaically necessarily. So I feel like I can access ideas better that way. But dance, I'll actually cast a circle for in the audience. Like I'll actually do a circle cast with my mind to bring the whole entire audience into that space and sort of hold them captive. My feeling is that if they showed up, they signed up.
Yeah.
So if my dance is a ritual and they want to see, then they have to be in the circle. And it sort of, it becomes this energetic cauldron of where the energy, I draw the energy toward myself.
As a musician, I know how there's this energetic feeding off of the audience, and it goes back and forth. And can you describe a little bit more about that? Now, you mentioned you cast the circle, and what that feels like, or anything that you could share about that experience for people who may have never experienced it.
Yeah, I feel that it's shamanic, and that when I'm doing an invocation of a goddess, for instance, like I just this past weekend did an invocation of Kali, I can actually, I feel myself becoming her, and that I'm the transmission. I am the transmission itself. I become the transmission itself of the energy that goddess has to communicate with the people in the room. And I know when I'm on it because I forget myself completely. Or there's even the witnessing part of myself that knows what's going on and can feel my body and all of this kind of stuff. But mostly my body's doing what I'm impelled to do by that goddess in that moment. And the art, to me, is taking the technique that I've learned over the years and channeling the goddess through that artistic technique. So it's not just me flailing around or doing things, but it's actually coming through a mastered technique, but yet it's the voice of the goddess in some way, as coming through me in body language.
Yeah, that's so true. Like they say, once you've mastered your musical instrument, then you can really get in the flow. And a lot of people give up before they've mastered the technique, and they never get to that point. And you mentioned how you're channeling the goddess, and I watched some of your videos, and we're going to put up links so people can see them as well. And the Babylon one, oh my God, I mean, that's totally, I thought right away, well, that was you in a past life, but it's like, but you're bringing it into the present. And I wanted to touch on a little bit too, the costumes that you wear, just so gorgeous, and the makeup and everything. How big of a role do you design the costumes yourself, or how big of a role do you play in that part as well?
I'm not much of a sewer. I'm not a crafts person. So usually what I do is I have a vision of it, and I'll ask maybe a very talented student of mine or somebody else who I have in my life. I'm lucky enough to have a lot of very talented human beings to make me the base of the costume. And then so something like, it's called a bedla, belly dance, the bra and skirt combination. So then I get my hot glue gun and I attach all the stuff, And the jewelry, I've just accumulated a lot of this stuff, and I just sort of mix and match it now, between different, So there's the mystery gone from that. But
well, it's gorgeous, and the music also. In one of them, you were doing it felt like some Kundalini breaths, and your body was doing it, and the music was doing it too. Do you have any part in the music, or is that chosen from another composer? You mentioned that you are a self-taught musician as well. Where does the music come from? Is it from someone else or you, or do you have a part in that too?
The music in that particular piece was called a song called "The Raven," and that wasn't me. That was somebody else. And though this weekend when I did Kali, I recorded my own Kali mantra with multiple tracks that I blew up with reverb to make it sound like the voice of the goddess. And so I'm working more with bringing this stuff together so that I am dancing to my own things, hopefully, soon and all that. But most of the music I play is very piano-based music, and it's not always like beat, for dancing. So it's a nice thing to be able to work, use other artists' works to dance to, because it gives me something new,
And you had mentioned how you liked Emily Dickinson, and she was so in touch with death and everything. And I have to mention the name of you're the artistic director for the Exquisite Corpse Dance Theater, and that is such a cool name.
That's a surrealist term. You may know that already. It's a surrealist term from the surrealist era of art and art history, whatever. And it's a parlor game, and sort of. The Exquisite Corpse drinks the new wine. It's a way that you take words from stream of consciousness and put them together, and it creates its own poem. So I had created a project a while back using YouTubes with a group of different professionals, and we created a choreography in kind of the same fashion. It was a song by Solace called Blood Oil Gold, and we were all signed a section of the music, and then we later got together and put it together, and it became this beautiful piece. Then I used the name as my troupe name.
I noticed that you have a lot of ink. Did you design your own tattoos as well? Or I know you probably didn't do them yourself, but did you help design them? Or
I did help design them. So just like the costumes, I design them, but then I leave the work to the professionals. And this one was my wolf hybrid that I had for 12 years, named Coda. And so this was very wonderful to have this put on here. The woman who did it was a foster mom for dogs and knew Coda pretty well, and actually looks a lot like him. So that was pretty great. It was just like him. And then this is this one. I don't want to be too immodest here, but this is the glyph for Pluto, god of the underworld.
Right. I've seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that put over my heart after I lived in a cabin out in the woods for a year. As a way of saying, I thought of, that the heart is strong enough to survive death, and so I had felt like I had lived through this underworld journey out there. I was really going through a Pluto transit, and so I had this as a way to sort of beautify the cracking open of this area of my my chakra system.
Have you ever had an experience during the creative process where you knew that something really transcendent had happened? I know you mentioned how that you're channeling the goddess during dance. Is there any other experiences that were something similar to that you could describe for us?
I think every time. There's why else be creative? That's the whole thing is to have that experience. So all art is magic. I think that it's not really art unless that experience is happening. Now, I think that there's, you make your art, you have that inspired time, and then later you can go back and you refine it and make it into something that may be something that people can relate to more, When you're inspired like that, I think that, it should be like the pen's moving in your hand, or like the music is creating itself. Like, even if it's out of tune, you are feeling like it's coming through you, and you feel good. I mean, that's the thing when you're in alignment and you're creating, you feel good. You feel at one with everything. If you're not feeling that way, you're not making art. You're playing with your craft. I think it's not magic then.
It should charge you up. You should feel charged up and energized if it's really something. So where does it come from? I ask everybody this. So what do you think? Where does it come from?
Well, I think it's your true will. I think it's your will within you. As it's connected to the divine will, it becomes one. In that moment that it becomes one, you are in flow. You're aligned. And you're doing what you're on this earth to do. Regardless of whether you have bills to pay or, your dog needs a walk, although I usually love doing that part of my day. I mean, I don't know that there is a source. We talk about source, but I think everything is source. It's all over the place. There's no source to, people talk sort of about tapping into source and tapping into flow. Everything's already in flow. It's when we're conscious of that fact that we're creative, and we can just sort of move out of resistance, and things just sort of happen. But I also think art requires technique, And I'll say that, I want to say that, we say everybody's an artist. I think that there's truth to that, but I think to be a master artist, you also hone your craft, so that when your true will is aligned with the divine will, you actually have a piece of art that maybe other people want to see.
Right. So speaking on that, this is another question that I'm asking everyone.
Yeah.
Can creativity be taught, or is it something innate? Like for your example, you said your family, it wasn't really around, it was just innately within you, if I understand correctly. Do you think it can be taught, or what's your take on that question?
I think it can be fostered, and I think it can be given space. I think it can be modeled. I think it can be encouraged, and I think that it can be fed. I'm not sure that we can teach someone to have an innate sense of how to do that. I think that's something that's there. I know for myself, actually growing up, my creativity was actively suppressed. So for me to have this is maybe an example of how it is that maybe that doesn't always matter. If it's your acorn, as James Hillman would put it, if it's your destiny to grow into an oak tree, you're going to grow into an oak tree.
Maybe that's the challenge of life anyway, or why we pick these families that don't foster our creativity. Maybe that's the whole reason of the incarnation.
Right. I think so. And he actually says that too, James Hillman.
Well, I think there's lots of people who don't do it, and it's a crying shame if they don't,
Right.
What advice would you give to those that would like to follow in your footsteps, and either in any of the creative expression forms that you have? What advice would you give some younger person coming up now?
Follow your bliss.
That's a good one.
If it feels good and it feels right, then it's your path. That's what I would say.
That's really cool. You have a poem that you would like to read for us, and would you like to do that now? This might be a good time to do that.
So this was written. The wind was blowing outside my window, and I often think of the wind as the animus, sort of the air element being a part of the divine masculine, and so on an archetypal level, I feel that I have this relationship with the wind in this way, and the sun, and the nature is my lover. And so sometimes that's where these poems are written from. So this was written at 3 a.m. What I do sometimes is I wake up in bed, and if I'm woken up by something like that, I grab my cell phone and I type out the poem. So this was one of those things that happened. So Howlin', layers of ghost notes, a song. The sound like the unfurling and whipping of sheets out to dry. Once soft against the skin of lovers, bound to the line and resisting an unforecasted storm. In from the sea. Over the night-lit land, spirit rivers colliding with the house. Fingers, hands licking the facade with an ancient tongue. Throwing gale at my window. Come out, come out. This is my violent serenade.
First thing I noticed is what you said about 3 a.m. And I've often said that so many musicians are up at 3 a.m. writing music, and there is something magical about that time at night. It's like the witching hour. And I think maybe it's because everybody's sleeping and it's quiet, but they're also out on the astral plane. That was the second thing that I got out of that poem. It's like you were, to steal a phrase from Peggy Sue Got Married, maybe you were browsing through time, you know, because you talk about, when you talked about, I'm getting chills all over, when you talked about the things in the wind, the sheets hanging in the wind. I think that was like a past life or something. That's what I was just getting. And it's like maybe you were just, you know, browsing through time, and then you just landed back in your body, and you still had some remembrance of astral traveling, like in the wind, being a spirit in the wind or something. Or what are your feelings about it?
Could be. Was it Wayne Dwyer? Are you familiar with?
Oh, Dr. Wayne Dwyer, yeah.
You're familiar with Wayne Dwyer? He talks about that time, that's the time to listen. That when I think he was talking about, maybe Rumi had said that. It was, I can't remember now. It was a mystic that he was quoting, that he said that he's experienced, and I've now taken that and realized that this is so. That 3 a.m. time is the time to listen, because that's when you're getting an accurate voice, or that's when you're getting that harder to hear voice, like you're saying. That voice of wisdom and that magical voice that's going to reveal to you the mystery.
Yeah, no pun intended, but it's off. I would call it the witching hour.
Yeah.
No pun intended, though. Why don't you tell everybody, wrap it up, or give some final thoughts, and tell everybody what you're doing, and how they can find you, and give your website and everything for people to want to, because there's so much more to look at. We only have a short amount of time, but you have so much. You're such a, prolific creator, and so give us a little rundown of how they can find you and what you're going to be doing.
Sure. My next, what am I doing next? I am performing a couple different places. I'm going to be traveling starting again next year. I've taken a hiatus over the last year or so because the traveling was starting to get to me. But I have Argentina lined up and a couple of other things. And then I am also doing a lot of self-portraiture photography right now and combining them with poems. And what I'd like to do is create some sort of multimedia immersive performance event that would have a lot of these things as, telling something. And I don't know what that is. I'm feeling around in dreams and astral travel and my past and seeing and sexuality and, really pushing those edges and wanting to do that kind of work. But you can always find me at aprilschaile.com, and then also at April's Astrology. That's my day job, basically, is being an astrologer. My guides told me that was the work I should do, and I've been very pleased with the results because I really like being an astrologer. So they put me in a chair, and I was doing, just to be brief about it, they put me in a chair and reclined the chair backwards. And they told me, they didn't use words, they just all went look up. And then they gave me a bowl that was attracting coins. That's how I should do that, And I've thought, well, that's astrology. Maybe that's even more. I don't know, but I also enjoy working with people, and I like being a practicing occultist for a living. It's kind of a nice thing to do, because I think of myself as a a magician, occultist, artist, a Thelemite, and a witch. It's all shaman. It's all wrapped up into one sort of thing. And
you do it beautifully. And you do it beautifully. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, Aepril, and I look forward to seeing what comes up next for you. And I'll see you in the Nuit report as well.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.